Welcome to the Water People podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept waterfolk on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, the podcast is a chance to dive into the aquatic experiences that really shape who we become back on land. This season is supported by Patagonia, whose purpose-driven mission is to use business to save our home planet. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Today we're in conversation with big wave surfer Felicity Palmateer. Flick, as she's known, grew up in wild Western Australia, where she started surfing with her dad at age 6, earned her first sponsor at 10, and started competing at age 12. After a decorated amateur career, Flick turned pro at 17 and has since honed in on heavy water. Felicity holds the record for the tallest wave surfed by an Australian woman, nudging out Lane Beachley's record in 2015. In 2016, she finished third in the first ever women's WSL Big Wave World Championship held at Piahi. Parallel to her surfing life, Felicity has served 2 stints on the hit reality TV series Australian Survivor, and she recently married a childhood friend. I caught up with Flick while she was recovering from a minor injury at home in Western Australia, before hitting the road to chase the biggest swells on the planet. I was really keen to have you on, Flick, because you're just an amazing water woman, and I feel like there are some timely issues that you can speak to from experience from within the surf world and then from the broader culture as well. So we always begin the podcast in the same place, and that's by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Felicity, can you share with us a time like that from your own life?
I was having a bit of a think about this because I was wondering how deep to go or whether I should really go that heavy so early on in our chat. But then I was like, you know what? I couldn't think of one time in my life that was more pivotal, meant more, and something I think about every single day pretty much. And it dictates how I live my life completely. So for people that don't know, my mum passed away coming up to 2 years ago, but she passed away from something called FTD, which is frontotemporal dementia. Now, she passed away at age 52 and she was diagnosed at 46. During that time of her diagnosis and while she was still alive, my grandma, my mum's mum, did a bunch of research and she discovered that there was a gene mutation in my family and that it's genetic. So my granddad, which is her partner, my mum's dad, he passed away of motor neuron disease. And so my grandma got a bunch of tests done to do with my mum's disease and my granddad's. My granddad's passed away. Now, he passed away when I was 12, found that there was a connection between the two, and that connection is there's a gene mutation. I hadn't really ever spoken about this so much, but it literally dictates everything I do in my life. When she found this out, she called up myself and my brothers, Luke and Alex, and just sat us down, said, I really need to talk to you guys about something that's really important. And this time in my life, I guess, it's the most important thing. It's just a conversation I had with my grandma where she sat us all down and said, there's a 50% chance that you will inherit this gene mutation. Wow. And if you do, you're either going to develop FTD or MND. And when I look back through the family tree on my granddad's side, everyone is passing away at a pretty young age. My granddad passed away at 64, I want to say, and then my mum at 52, and it was in my 20s. You know, there's not many people in their 20s that are contemplating, holy crap, when they're going to die. And what their next 15 years might look like. And that 15 years might be the next good years that they have of life before something serious happens. I mean, we can dive way more into all stuff to do with my mum and everything later on and family and that gene thing. But I just, from that moment on in my life, in my 20s, realizing that, wow, my mum started showing signs. Look, she was diagnosed at 46. She probably was showing signs about maybe anywhere between 8 to 10 years before that. I sit here now as I talk to you today, I'm 30 years old. My mum probably started showing signs at 40. So as I sit here now, I could potentially only have 10 years left of life. So there is a test that I could get done to see if I carry this gene or not. Now, I thought about it for a long time and I still think about it today. You know, it's a question that I toss up in my head, like, should I get tested? Should I not get tested? And everyone's decision is different around this. And the way I see it now and where I stand is that I don't want to be tested, because from that moment onwards, when I found that out, I have made a conscious decision in my life of who I want to spend time with, where I spend my time, who's that, like, just everything is very conscious, like the time that I spend with people. And I'm like, why would I want to find out if I carry this gene mutation? Because if I find out I have it and I'm gene positive, I will develop FTD or MND. And then I have to deal with that knowledge every single day, knowing that I'm counting down to one day less. Like, and, you know, noticing things about my body, like, oh my God, is this a sign of, you know, FTD or MND? And so my decision might be different if I worked a 9 to 5, I was sitting in an office and I wanted to do this test because I would make drastic life changes. You know, if I was sitting in a 9 to 5 in an office chair, I would be like, far out, I've got to like quit my job and start traveling and see the world and do all these things. But if I look at where I am now, I'm like, wow, you really do make the most of your life. Your life's amazing. You love what you do. And why would I want that hanging over my head? So when I originally found out, I thought about, you know, getting tested. And when you do tests like this, you've got to go to a gene counselor because it's very heavy when you find information out like this, you know.
Wow, I didn't even know that was a profession, a gene counselor.
Yeah, you got to get gene counseling because, I mean, when you get dealt a piece of information like that, look, FTD or MND, when you get a diagnosis like that, it's prepare for end of life. There is no cure, you know, and how fast that happens to when you get to that stage is dependent on the person and environment and lots of different things. From then on in my life, like I still toy with the thought of, you know, would I want to find out or would I not want to find out? But where I sit right now is I don't want to know and make the most of my life. And the other thing is that, look, I can sit here and talk about this all day, but I could literally walk out on the street and get hit by a bus tomorrow. And what's the point in even worrying about it all? So that's where I'm at right now. You know, maybe if you ask me in 2 years' time, I'm a woman, I'm getting older now, I've got a biological clock, I think I want to have kids. I'm going to probably have to find out if I have this gene because I don't want to pass it on. Inevitably, I might find out one day. And anyway, lots of what ifs, lots of questions, lots of things that you think are lots of moral decisions, and everyone's moral compass is different.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea. That is, wow, the ultimate ping pong match in your mind, trying to make those decisions, especially as a 20-year-old, and at the same time losing your mama. I mean, I was coming into this conversation just going to ask you about turning 30, and wow, you've been coping with mortality and weighing the kind of potential loomingness of your own mortality for a decade now, almost.
Yeah, look, it's very confronting also because I was around my mum watching all this happen. I also was around my granddad. And at this time with my granddad, no one knew that this was genetic. When my granddad was diagnosed with MND, our family just thought that it was just this weird anomaly. And watching him deteriorate over time, we lost him when I was 12 years old. And that was my first experience with death. And it's that's so difficult with me. You know, MND and FTD are very similar in the way that MND, my granddad, your body just shuts down around you. You still have your mind, you can still think, but your body just shuts down and eventually you suffocate to death and you're immobile, you're in a wheelchair, nothing works anymore, you can't feed yourself, shower yourself, walk, whatever. And when you're 12 years old watching your granddad go through that, it's super confronting. And then fast forward a few years, and then now mum, and watching her go through that. And that whole experience with my mum, really that was the whole catalyst for my family fracturing as well. So it's had a massive impact, right?
Divorcing? So your parents divorcing, splitting up?
Yeah, my parents split up. They were never married, but they were together since they were 16, so they've been together for a long time and had myself and my two brothers. But like obviously the behaviours that my mum started showing, retreating more, becoming more of a hermit, it was all behavioural stuff in the beginning. And my dad thought, and we all did, no one knew any better at the time. These are slow things that happen over time. And unless when you're around someone all the time, you don't notice these things, right? It actually took a family member who hadn't seen my mum in about 10 years, she's a speech pathologist, to notice that something was wrong with my mum's speech. And that's when all this testing started. But yeah, back to my point is that watching both my granddad and my mum go through it is incredibly confronting, being told then that you could this could be your reality, as I sit here 10 years time. That's super confronting, because I watched the whole thing. I watched what it did to my family. I watched what it did to me, my brothers, my dad, my grandma. I think about my grandma, man. My grandma's one of the strongest people I know. She looked after her husband until he passed away. And then she also cared for my mum until she passed away. So yeah, super heavy. And I feel like when you were going to ask me that, I was like, far out, do I go this heavy? And but it really has changed everything in my life and the way that I look at everything. Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful that you shared, and we like going deep on this podcast. We like making a space for the reality behind these amazing water folk like yourself, and what makes you tick, and what allows you to sit in a lineup at Jaws and say yes and paddle in. And this is part of what informs that decision, isn't it?
Oh, completely. Completely. I think it's a big part of why I do what I do. And if I look at why I started surfing big waves and why I made that transition and when that happened in my life, it coincides with my mum's diagnosis around the same time. I was 25 years old. I was also really burnt out from competing and traveling and being a sponsored athlete. And I feel like, so there's a lot of different things coinciding here, but once I found that out about my mum and watching her go through that, and she didn't have a choice in it, and just watching how brave she was, and obviously now she's passed away, it is the reason I do it is that I dedicate what I do to my mum. I dedicate it to her because she didn't get a choice in this, and I want to live my life in the way that she couldn't, and I want to continue that legacy. So I guess it comes from a dedication. That's why I do it and why I go. And also it comes down to just fuck it. Because why not? And look, I can get all deep and meaningful about consequential environments and how they're forcing factors for things to be true. And, I can get all woo-woo and why but at the core of it, it really is just for fun too, it really is.
Yeah, well, it really, there's nothing like losing someone you love or watching someone slow decline. I've been in a bit of that situation with my own mom. She had an amputation a few years ago, had her leg amputated, went through stage 4 cancer, and she's alive, but she just hasn't really recovered. She doesn't have a strong sense of meaning or purpose or motivation to rebuild her strength and to get back to living. And it's such a process of grief to slowly mourn someone who's still alive. It's such a bizarre experience to be mourning someone who's physically still there, but also not there.
Yeah. My heart goes out to you because I really realize, I know how hard that is. And I know how incredibly confronting it is to be around your parents when they're in that headspace. And it's a weird thing when someone you love is still alive and your relationship changes over those years with that person. The relationship I had with my mum when I was 6 to when I was 12 to when I was 16 to 18 it's just completely different over those years. And as she changed as well, our relationship changed, and you've got to find ways that you can still connect with her, or with whoever is going through this. And it's incredibly difficult. It took, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 1, 2, 6 years, right? Maths is not a strong point. So 6 years until she passed away. And people, sometimes would say, oh, you've been grieving her for so long, so maybe is that easier now that she's gone? And I'd be like, look, it actually isn't, because it's 6 years of grieving. And then when you lose someone and their actual physical body is gone, it's a really defining, especially your mother, it's a defining moment in your life or a person's life. And yeah, it doesn't make it any easier. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, would it be easier? I toss around with the idea in my head, but I think it's all just really fucking bad and hard. If, she was gone just like that, would that be easier? Would that be more pain-free? because of all this suffering didn't exist. I don't know.
No good options in that situation, really.
Yeah.
What role has surfing and being in the ocean played through your grieving process?
It's played different sort of roles over the years. So obviously I fell in love with surfing at such a young age. Like my dad taught me to surf. He's super stoked to go surfing. Even these days when he can, he still will. Like, he's more stoked than me. So, you know, and then obviously I had like a fun professional career as like shortboarding, world tour, pro juniors, state Aussie titles, all the things you could do. And I've got so many good memories around surfing and the beach and the connection to the ocean and the environment, and just so positive, especially in the very beginning, you know, just when it was just super pure, just our little family. Mum would take us out of school. If the waves or the beach or the weather was good, we'd go down and just like go for a surf and just be so nice. And so just really happy memories there. And then as the years go on, I guess, like, and you hear so many people talk about it, but surfing is, you know, that sort of form of escapism, a place to go. It's therapy, it's our church, it's all these things. And it's definitely been that for me. However, sometimes I find that the ocean is sometimes like the biggest mirror to how you feel in life, right? And if over the last few years, there's been a lot going on, I'd probably say since I was about 25 to 30, last 5 years, there's been a lot. Maybe even before that, really. And when I was 25 and I sort of took that year off and, you know, didn't compete and things like that, I didn't want to surf because all those emotions around family, pressures from other things in life, pressures from the surf industry, things like that, all that was intensified when I'd go to the water, and I'd just think about it constantly. And I'd be like, for fuck's sake, I'm going in the water to get away from this. I kind of want to think about it even more.
Yeah.
But that is the beauty of surfing. Sometimes it really does force you to just sit still and not be on your phone and not do other things to stop thinking about those things that you really need to think about.
It's amazing how complex it can be, though, our relationship with surfing over time. If you do have family pressures, or if surfing is your job, like it was for you, there are a lot of additional layers that you have to navigate just sitting in a lineup. It's not the simple, pure experience that we often associate with being in the ocean.
Look, it definitely, and I echo everything you just said. But now, and I've done a lot of work to get to where I am now and feel like my path is clear now and know where I want to go. But it's a really good, positive place for me now. It's a place where I go to find peace, calmness. It's a place that I find stillness, and it is meditative for me. And it's a place where I go, and this does sound a bit weird, but I feel like I connect. My why is really strong in why I'm out there, and it feels like I'm connected to my mum in some way, because what I'm doing, I'm so sure of why I'm doing it. It just feels so good. You know, it makes you emotional. It definitely makes me emotional sometimes, because I'm like, wow, does it have to be that deep? Listen, but it does for me, and it definitely now it feels really good. I'm sure maybe in a few years' time something else might happen, and I'll be like, I don't want to surf right now. It's all too much.
Maybe not. Is it true that you found out about your mom's passing while you were on set shooting Survivor Australia?
Yeah, that's true. So what was it? 2021. I got the call. Basically, a producer slid into my DMs on Instagram and was like, hey, have you ever thought about competing on Australian Survivor? We think you'd be really good. And I was like, actually, yes. I always thought to myself, if there was ever one bloody reality shit TV show, like that would be the one I'd want to do, you know, good test of character, pushing yourself. Obviously, it is produced to some extent. It's a reality TV show, but I just thought this would be cool. So I just ran with it, and I was like, you know what, this would be awesome. Let's just see where it goes. I've had a bunch of different things come up like that, and nothing ever eventuated. So I was like, whatever, I'll just, no expectations, just keep going with it. And just kept progressing through the stages, had to go through the casting process, and I got on. And I just was like, wow, holy crap, I'm actually going to do this. And I have watched the show before, and I do like it. It's pretty fun. It's pretty interesting. It's a social experiment. And so I got pretty excited for it. But before I left, we had some news. My mum was still alive at the time, and my grandma sat my brothers and I down, and the occupational therapist and my mum's doctor and neurologist had basically said, look, she's declining quite a lot, and from what we can see, we think she's probably got another year left. So we started talking about if that was, you know, what happens when the time comes when because what happens when someone is like in a wheelchair and they can't shower, feed, talk, non-verbal, do anything, they're in a wheelchair, right? Like eventually she'll stop being able to swallow. And when that happens, you have a decision to make, my brothers and my grandma and I, do we want to prolong her life by putting a peg in her stomach and like feed her through a tube, or do we just want to let nature take its course? And so we decided that that's just so cruel to keep someone alive when there's just been so much suffering. So we made a decision as a family that if that was to happen, we would let nature take its course. And so prior to this as well, had a cracker of a year. My dad was diagnosed with leukemia. And so he was really sick at this stage. Before going into Survivor, I was more worried about my dad passing away than what I was about my mum, because we'd had intel that my mum had another year. So I went on this show and look, turns out I was actually pretty good at making a few mates, and I got all the way to the end basically. There was only like a week or two left of filming, and it's an incredibly tough show to be on. It will push you in places you've never been pushed before. You're starving, you're sleep deprived, you're making decisions and forced to get along with people that you might not like. And so it's hard enough as it is. And then eventually you had a week and a half left of filming. There was only about 5 or 6 of us left on the show. A producer started, I had all these things. So basically before I went in, because of my situation and my situation at home, I had a couple of things written into my contract where if this A, B, C, or D happens at home, can you please let me know? And I saw a producer walking towards me and they were looking really not in a good headspace. And I was like, holy shit, I instantly knew my stomach just like, or my heart fell and my stomach dropped. And I was just like, shit, something's happened to my dad. And they said, hey, Flick, we just got to pull you aside. The executive producer has the phone and your grandma's on the phone. And I was like, okay, well, what grandma is it? And anyway, so I spoke to my grandma and she basically told me the news that my mum had passed away. And, and I got to speak to my brothers, and there's nothing more isolating being stuck on a reality TV show thousands of kilometres away in the middle of Australia.
Oh my God.
With a bunch of people who want to stab you in the back, and then you're told that your mum has passed away. It's very isolating. It was traumatic. 100% it was very, very traumatic. But what I will say is that the support from Endemol Shine, which is the casting agency and the production agency or whatever, they were amazing, actually were incredible in the support that I received. So during that time, I had a really hard conversation with my grandma and with my brothers, and they basically said, Flick, like, we've been grieving mum for 6 years. We all know this. We've all lived it. And you're so close to the end. But you coming back, we're fine. Like, we've got each other here. Obviously, we're upset, but, like, mum would want you to keep going, as if she's going to want you to fly back. She's already gone. Like, we're actually okay. Well, of course, we're really upset, but we're going to get through this. We've got enough support here. If you think you can physically go on and put one foot in front of the other and keep going, we want you to do it. And I was like, okay. And then I also started to put it in my head, I was like, well, this is a really fucked situation, but I've got a massive platform here. And if I can choose to turn this into something good in some sort of way, obviously by sharing this incredibly difficult moment in my life, maybe we can turn it into something good. And so I kept putting one foot in front of the other and made it right to the end, ended up finishing third, made it to the final. And yeah, the show went to air and I ended up getting aligned with Dementia Australia and the Parent Institute, which they do specific research into the gene mutation that I could potentially have, what my mum had. Ended up raising a bunch of money, 30 grand for both the Parent Institute and Dementia Australia.
Wow.
So that was really cool. And it was a lot, obviously, when that episode went to air. Also amazing, the outpour of people being connected to me and the story, because they felt so isolated that they thought that, caring for someone when they're in that stage of life or when they have dementia, it can become incredibly isolating, especially when, for me, I'm someone who was so young watching my parent go through that. Like, even when she first got diagnosed, I didn't want to tell people, this sounds bad, but like, I was ashamed. I didn't understand what it was. None of my friends are going through this with their parent, who's some of the behavioural stuff that when my mum, her first symptoms were, mate, they were strange. And like, I would be like worried to have people.
Yeah, like what are the early telltale signs of dementia?
Well, look, my mum's one is pretty specific, but it can be behavioural, it can be memory. However, the stuff with my mum was a lot of behavioural stuff. And her fine motor skills. So, and her speech was slightly slurred. Now, we didn't, as a family, we actually didn't notice the speech because we're around her so much. It's just so hard to notice. Anyway, so yeah, slight speech slur, just strange things. I mean, towards the end, well, not the end, but like when my grandma was caring for her, she would escape the house, be missing at night. We had this one incident. She was missing for hours. And anyway, my grandma ended up calling the police and they had to get the dog squad out, the helicopter. They were looking for her for hours at night. They found her. And then she lied about who she was. And she said, no, I'm not Pauline. I'm so-and-so. And so the police just kept on going. And like, just this strange behavioural things you can't explain, like really obsessed with sugar. Like, man, she just wanted to eat anything sweet. She would eat it. She'd be in the freezer. My grandma would be like, what are you doing in the freezer again? Get out of there. And she'd be like eating ice cream. Like she'd be awake all night. She would pack her bags as if she was going to go. She would think people were very scary stuff, man.
Wow.
Like thinking that people were after her, laying there at night, thinking people were trying to feed her through her ears. Like she wouldn't, it was, just like, and when you're younger and your parent is going through these things and no one else's parents that I knew was going through stuff like this, is just like, holy, like, how do I relate to you? Or how do I share my life with you? I don't know, and especially the younger you are, the more judgmental people are, I feel like, because they don't have that lived experience as well. So, yeah.
Wow. How do you make sense of that time with your mom now? Are you gentle on your young self, or do you have regrets about how you handled her story?
There's a lot of other things that happened during that time, stuff I probably won't share, but where our relationship became fractured. So I didn't speak to my mum from probably about the age of 18 through to when she was diagnosed. And something happened between us that it was because of her disease, but it wasn't explained at the time because she wasn't diagnosed. But for me, it was almost like I don't know if I can move past this. But then obviously once she was diagnosed, I just forgot about it all. And then when she was diagnosed, it was too hard for me to have a chat with her. I'm not going to reconcile it with her. Do you know what I mean? It was too far gone. My mum became nonverbal, which meant she couldn't speak. And I'm not going to get answers from her about why things happen. And obviously it was because of the disease. Yeah. So I've just had to put that aside for the family and for my brothers. And that must have been hard on my brothers too. Like, when I wasn't speaking to mum as well. And anyway, when I look back on it now, I didn't know any better. I didn't know what was happening. No one did. And I feel sad about the whole situation. There's just a great sadness around it all. And I guess when I really think about this whole gene mutation, I'm scared for the future. I am, because I know it's not over. There's a high probability that myself or my brothers will develop this. And knowing that that's what's ahead, and everything that came with what happened with my mum could potentially be just around the corner, is a scary prospect.
It is so confronting and so heavy. I'm so sorry you've had to grapple with this for all these years. And what an irony that you literally went on a show called Survivor amidst all of this. It is just bizarre.
It's so funny. I don't, like, it's just weighs so heavy, when you really think about everything, when I think about my future, when I think about what happened. But I am such a lighthearted person. I guess that's maybe why I don't take anything too seriously. I'm like, whatever. Maybe I need to care a bit more. I don't know.
Well, I don't know you well anymore, but we've spent a little bit of time together. And what I know about you is that you know how to have a good time. And
this is true. This
amongst
is very
a lot
true.
of other things. And speaking of knowing you a long time ago, I first interviewed you while we were on a surf trip, a team trip to New Zealand in 2015. You were 21, I was 27, and I'd love to play a short clip from that chat we had in the back of a combi van along the coast of New Zealand and hear you reflect on who you were then and who you are now. Should I play it again? Do you want me to play it so it can be fresh?
Yeah, play it again,
okay,
so I can listen again, yeah.
I've been told point blank, if I do not lose 10 kilos, I will be dropped. And I've been told if I was a lesbian, I would be dropped. I've been told snide remarks like thousands of times, like gone away on team trips and not feeling like I couldn't eat in front of people because they're constantly judging what I'm putting in my mouth. Like, it's, what else? I don't know. It just makes me so mad.
It's crazy. It's such a dark side to our broader culture, but surfing culture in particular.
The crazy thing is like this lifestyle that we lead, and it looks all so peachy from the outside, and it really is. Like, we lead the most amazing life, and we're so lucky, and like, I feel so appreciative to be able to do what I'm doing. But at the same time, there's so much more added pressures, and it's the fact that it's not in, people don't know about it, and it's shunned to the side, and all this is happening behind like closed doors. It's just so freaking wrong, and I hate the fact that like people like that guy is getting away, well, not so much anymore, but got away for so many years, for so long, and just like that seriously fucked with me. Like, it still fucks with me now. Like, it's never going to be something that I will never forget it, and I'll never let it go, because it pushed me away from wanting to do anything, and I don't know. It pushed me away from surfing, really.
How does that land for you now, knowing what you know now?
Wow. When I listen to that back, I just feel sad that I wasn't brave enough at that time to stand up for something that was so wrong.
Mm.
And
you mean someone else doing something so wrong, because you weren't doing anything wrong?
No, that's exactly it. You know, like, I wasn't brave enough to stand up to someone who was doing, you know, certain individual. I feel sad that I wasn't strong enough to stand up to this person, or even just to say something about this, because it is so wrong. And I'm grateful that we live in a world now where if that was to happen, if that was to come to the light of day, there would be a big song and dance about that.
Do you think it's really changed? Do you think the culture's changed that much?
I think it has changed. I think it definitely there's still more work to do, 100%, but it's definitely a different time between now and then, back then. I think there's a few things I've got to say about that, is that, look, there's a lot of good that came from sponsorships and that industry from me. Like, there's a lot of good things that happen. However, there's a couple of things that got said to me, obviously, which we just heard, by certain individuals within the industry that have changed my life forever as well. Things that I still notice myself mentally being like, whoa, like, that's a handbrake for me, or that's still in my mind, and I still wrestle with that.
It was particularly a time of squashing any sort of non-heterosexual experimentation. That was like one of the, I know so many women not so many, but quite a few women who have had a similar experience of being sexually quite open, but being threatened with their livelihoods, with their jobs as sponsored athletes, if they were to make public their relationships with other women.
Well, so the thing is I was in a relationship with a girl for 2 years, and I had to hide my relationship for the whole 2 years out of fear that I would lose my relationship because of certain things that were said on trips, certain things that were said from people in positions of power that to a young girl make you realize, oh my God, like, I can't be seen hanging out with those people. I can't be showing affection to this girl that I love. I can't, like, there was a lot of suppression that happened. Suppression of my sexuality, suppression of the way I could express myself. And it's really damaging. It really is. And when you have to hide and keep it a secret with the person that you love for 2 years, no public displays of affection. And even when I did let people know in my circle, my mum was the first person I told. I told my dad and my family. They're pretty supportive. My mum was great. Then I slowly started to let in a few friends, and I could tell what friends, everyone is a bit more educated these days, which is really good. But there was definitely friends that were like, oh, is she going to turn me gay? Does she love me? Is she going to have a crush on me? Like, just shit behavior, that
just
really
ignorance,
and
really.
Then sort of it is ignorance, and then that internalizes within myself too, to make me think that there was something wrong with me at the time. And like, what's wrong with me? Am I disgusting? Like, that's how I felt. Like, is what I'm doing wrong? Like, and yeah, I mean, even to the weight thing, I could speak to that a lot. Hearing those, I look back at photos of myself when I was 15, 16, I was going through puberty, women's bodies change when they go through that period in time. I look back at photos of myself and I'm like, oh my God, like, girl, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, yeah, okay, maybe I put on a tiny bit of weight, but I weighed the same as what I do now back then. Yeah. And like, I love my body. I'm like, I love what it does. I love what it allows me to do. I love my strong arms, my strong legs, all these things. And I look back at my body then and it's just like, I was just going through a change in my body. Like, how could you be so harsh? That was very damaging hearing those words too. I mean, I look back at images of myself. Obviously, there was nothing wrong with me. It was completely fine. I was just going through a change. And this is actually not a funny moment, but not funny at all. But there was a moment probably about 6 years ago. So I was Googling my name. Don't ask me why. I can't remember why.
We all do it.
Yeah. So I typed in Felicity Palmateer and Google starts to predict what it thinks, is the next, what you want to search. And so it was Felicity Palmateer weight loss was the first thing that came up. So obviously I had lost enough weight for people to realize, holy crap, this girl is like, and I'd lost like 10 kilos. So I usually weigh like, and I don't really like to, anyway, I'd lost 10 kilos. I'm not going to talk about numbers or what I weigh or what I used to weigh or whatever. But I look back to photos of myself. So obviously once I got told that I needed to lose a certain amount of weight. So obviously once you hear words like, you need to look a certain way and you need to lose these kilos because, that's going to have an impact on your career and your contract. That's super damaging. It put me into a downward spiral. I would not eat and then I would binge eat. And then anything that I would eat that was like what I considered a cheat food, I would throw it up. And this went on for about 2 to 3 years, I reckon, probably longer, maybe 4 years, and just formed this super unhealthy relationship with food all at the same time as well, but trying to be a professional athlete. Like those things just don't go hand in hand.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible.
If the first 50 years were an experiment,
to prove that a business could be
responsible
and successful,
turns out it's not just possible,
it's profitable.
So what's next?
What's next is simple. It's human-powered, and it's finding the joy in doing difficult things.
What's next is turning capitalism on its head
and putting all our money where our mouth is.
What's next is unstoppable.
Thanks to Patagonia for their continued support this season and for prioritizing purpose over profit to protect our wondrous planet, our only home. Born on the back streets of Byron Bay, Stone & Wood is a certified B Corp started by 3 mates who wanted to make a beer business with a difference, a brewery for the community. Through their ingrained foundation, Stone & Wood donates money and volunteer hours directly to the communities where they work and live, focusing on the environment and social causes at a grassroots level. Thanks for your support this season, Stone & Wood, and thanks for giving back to our community here on the Northern Rivers. Learn more at stoneandwood.com.au. I remember meeting you when you were maybe, I don't know, you were still a teenager. And then I remember you going through this change from the outside, not knowing you, not knowing what was going on. But I remember speaking to other people who were in positions of power and them going, wow, Felicity, and the quote was, she's really coming into her own now. And my then feminist trained brain was looking at this going, she's always surfed amazing. She's improving, she's getting older, but I think what they mean is she's skinny and she's fitting, quote, the marketable, absolutely mostly unattainable physical standard and ideal that those brands prey upon to exploit for selling things. I remember watching that happen and going, oh, that's what's happening here. And I was concerned about you and what was happening, basically.
Yeah. For me, I was just confused because I didn't really know what the surf industry wanted from me. I think, there's a lot of women getting paid big money because of, the lifestyle they live and looking good in a bikini as opposed to performance. I think we've seen a change in that recently. I guess I see, as the world evolves, we've got a few trends coming on, obviously not trends, but, brands wanting to be more diverse. And I love that. Like, I love seeing it. It's just, are you really being authentic to that? And it's very easy to see through And it's just so weird,
Well, you know it for what it is now. You know that you've been one of those girls who got sucked up and chewed up and spat out the other side. And you've had to deal with the emotional reality of having been spoken to as a child in the way that you were. And I think you've coped so incredibly. Like, what an inspiration for you to have been juggling all of those fucked up elements and to come out and be the athlete that you are. I'm looking at this photo of you from, I think, one of the outer reefs in Hawaii, bottom turning on this beautiful, spacious blue wave. Who's the photographer? Brown Cannon.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is, but do you know the photo I'm talking about?
Yeah. I know
Your big red board. And I just think that is someone who is completely unself-conscious. You grew out of this industry and this culture that encourages all of us, and particularly women and girls, to be obsessed and hyper aware of our physicality, how much space we take up, how loud we are, how we adhere to certain lines and curves in photos. And it's overwhelming. And then when I look at what you're doing with your big wave surfing, I just think, what a triumph to get to this point. And I can see how you would have been so attracted to something where there's zero room. There's no room for self-consciousness. It's all presence, all embodiment, and no room for bullshit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm doing it purely just for me. That's it. I'm not doing it for anyone else. And it's just, there is a few more things that I kind of want to say as well, like just about that last topic. I just think it's interesting, I'm super conscious about watching this next generation come up, and obviously the scope has changed slightly, and I'm just watching how brands are marketing like the young females coming up, and I do see a change. I just wonder, and I do see a change within the brands and like people who they're employing.
Your cohort of female surfers, you and Ellie Jean Coffey, and then there was with Rip Curl, Alana Blanchard at the time. It was a particularly sexualized time in women's surfing that was particularly swinging not toward performance in terms of what was being valued from sponsored athletes. I agree, that's definitely changed to a large degree. But what else are you seeing now?
I wonder if, even when I look at it from like, these kids coming up and so obviously you've got the pressure of like marketing and how you want to be perceived in the world and how these brands are going to be representing you and the image you want to put out. But then on top of that, you've got, young kids being pushed by their parents to like be this professional surfer. I just feel like there needs to be, because that's a lot of pressure in itself. I got pushed really hard when I was a kid too. And look, when I look back, I wonder sometimes if dad didn't push me as hard as what he did, would I be as resilient as what I am? I don't know. But I do owe a lot of my success, especially in the big wave realm, to how hard he pushed me, because I don't know, if he didn't push me, would I have pushed myself? Anyway, but so I got pushed hard. There's a lot, but this story, this is not just my story. This is a lot of other people's story, There's a lot of other people in the surf industry and there's so many kids that come up and they get, they want to qualify for the tour, and the surfing's obsessed with the cult of youth and qualify younger and younger and younger. It does come at a cost though, that's why we have people on tour taking mental health breaks. As we've seen it on the women's side, we've seen it on the men's side. I just think in terms of even obviously the marketing aspect, the coming up being a young kid wanting to be a professional surfer or a surfer, any sort of surfer, and be marketed like that or represented by a brand, there needs to be a framework around that, and there needs to be a better support system. And I don't know what that looks like. But I just feel like something like that needs to exist, like a organization, something that needs to monitor this and make sure that certain things are happening that need to happen and certain things are not happening that shouldn't be happening.
To set healthy boundaries. There's a lot of lack of boundaries, especially in this kind of career path, because your personhood becomes so attached to the identity of your marketed self that it's very difficult to differentiate the two. I'm sure you've grappled with this over the years.
Yeah. So there's that. But then there's kids going through this that I've done a lot of work to get to where I am now, to feel the way I do, to feel so grounded, to feel so stable. But then there might be kids who don't know how to ask for help, who don't, and what happens for them?
How did you know? How did you know to ask for help, and what did that help look like?
I got professional help, and I've been in and out of therapy and talking to someone for the last sort of 8 years. But for me, it was more the thing that forced me to go, not forced, but like really was the tipping point, was the whole gene mutation, family situation, mum and dad. And it just was all happening at once. I was like, fuck, this is way too much. And so I went for that. And then because of that, I then started to unpack all this stuff from childhood, teen, and things that obviously were not right, that I'm, like I said before, that I'm realizing now I still have current little semi-handbrakes in my life. They're handbrakes for certain things. And, you know, maybe I didn't have the best coping mechanisms at the time, but I've got better ones now. But I just, you know, so many kids come up through here, and like, yeah, to some extent you could say, you know, I am at the top of, I have whatever you considered making it in inverted commas or whatever. Yeah, I'm a big wave surfer and I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. But like, what happens to all those kids that don't get to here? You know, they got pushed so hard, they got marketed so hard, and I don't know. It's just, anyway.
It's a great question. And it's one, as a culture and as a community, we don't talk about. We don't talk about the kids who are kind of at least emotional casualties of being professional surfers. You wrote recently that you had the very best winter of your life. Quote, from Jaws to Outer Reefs to Waimea and Todos Santos, this was by far the best winter of my life. Blood, sweat, and tears went into this. I'm curious about who and what prepared you for your best ever big wave winter.
Oh, yeah. I look back at Hawaii and it was just amazing for me in so many ways. It was the best ever winter I've ever had, but a lot of work went into that. You know, like people look at the photos and they say, Flick just surfed a big wave. Cool. You know, some people just think you just go out and surf a big wave and that you know, that's it. That's how it all happened on one day. But so start of 2022, I started toying with the idea of, you know, well, Western Australia was so locked down during COVID. We couldn't leave. We had this bloody iron border gate thing up that people weren't allowed in and we weren't allowed out. So I sat here for 2 years wondering, what am I going to do? Am I just going to settle down, maybe have a couple of kids? I don't know. And then all of a sudden I started toying with the idea of going back to Hawaii. And I just discovered that I wasn't done. And I kind of knew that already. But yeah, I just started training, started getting in the right mindset. I got connected with a lot of different people over there. That was super influential into like why I achieved, or in my books, achieved those goals and surf the waves I did. But super grateful to be connected with Jamie Mitchell, because he was an incredible waterman and so many accolades to his name, and yeah, incredible waterman. So I reached out to him and basically said, hey, look, I'm thinking of coming over. And I knew, because it had been so long since the last time I'd been in Hawaii. Last time I went to Hawaii was in 2019 for the Jaws Challenge. I got second there, rode 3 waves, was super happy with my performance. And I was like ready to keep rolling on with that. But obviously COVID happened, right? So I got stuck for 2 years. I'd lost a lot of my...
and that was you surfing Jaws having never surfed it before. Is that correct?
No.
Or was that the second time? That was the second time around.
That was the very first time I ever went to Jaws was in 2015. It was for the first ever Jaws Challenge. And that was the first ever women's big wave event sanctioned by the WSL. And so there'd been big wave women's events before. This was just the first sanctioned one by WSL and the first time we were on the broadcast and stuff. So that was my first time ever surfing Jaws, was during that event. And then I went back in 2016 and then in 2019. Yep. So I'd surfed it 3 times. But yeah, so that was the last time, 2 years off. And then I was like, I'd lost a lot of my confidence over those 2 years. I feel like, it's a long time to not surf a wave over 10 to 15 foot. And then it takes, you know, repetition, time doing it. There's a lot that goes into building your confidence, like your internal dialogue, breath enhancement training, strength and conditioning training, getting comfortable on the ski again, lots and lots of stuff, being comfortable with your team, who you're working with. And yeah, so I got in touch with Jamie and he was like, yeah, Flick, I'm keen. Like, let's talk about it a bit more. Tell me what your goals are. Like, I'm happy to sort of come in as this sort of mentor role and let's talk about it. So I sent him through a bunch of the stuff that I wanted to work on, and I actually stayed with him as well in Hawaii, which was really cool. He's got an amazing family there. They're all really beautiful people and really took me in, I guess, as well. So it's nice, like, be there. And I was there for 3 months, training every day, just feeling so a part of Hawaii and the big wave scene. And, you know, slowly the swells started to roll in and just started banking swells and becoming more and more confident and refining equipment and talking about every session with Jamie, and just surfing with him was cool. Like, he pushed me a lot too. And yeah, he's so talented and just an ocean knowledge and where he positions himself in the lineup. And anyway, so that was awesome. And yeah, managed to get over to Jaws, went to Todos Santos with Jamie, Waimea, and ended up surfing the day of the eddy at an outer reef, which is the photo you're looking at. Yeah, that was incredible. I've never seen waves or the ocean move like that in my life. So Laura Enever and I buddied up a bit that time on the North Shore, and it was cool, super positive relationship, pushing each other and just having fun. It's funny, two little blonde Aussies like trotting out on their pastel coloured big wave gun boards. Like, she's got this pastel yellow board, I have this like pastel-y bright pink, and just trotting along the water's edge like, woo, we're here. But yeah, funny thing to think about. But when I look back, there's a lot that went into that. I'm so proud of myself. I'm proud of all the work that happened to get to that moment, to achieve the things I did, to surf the waves I did. There was a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money, emotionally, physically, financially, that went into it, and I'm proud of myself.
As you should be. Wow, what a season. I feel like it's been such a standout period in time for women's big wave surfing, and it's amazing to watch you be part of that movement of really stretching that branch of the surfing tree.
Thank you. That's
very cool. And we chatted briefly about this before we started recording, but you recently wed. Can you tell us a little love story?
Yes. So I am a missus.
And also why I ask is I'm really curious about how that sort of the stability that comes with being in a committed relationship, and the stability of having your family, knowing your family is there for you and relatively healthy with your dad, how has that impacted things now?
My relationships are the most important thing in my life, and I am very grateful to have Mitch in my life, because he is exactly what you said, the stability, the great foundation for me to be able to go and do these things, because for so long that foundation was so shaky that it's so hard to succeed in other areas of your life if that's happening. So I have known Mitch for a really, really long time. He's actually best friends with my cousins, Josh and Brooke. And every time I moved to the East Coast for 8 years, I was based over there and I was living on the Gold Coast. I'd always come home to Western Australia for a couple of weeks over the Christmas period, and he'd always be at my cousin's place. I'd always see him. He had a partner, I had a partner, and just timing wasn't right. And then when I was like 20, I'd be like, oh, he's kind of good looking, I don't know. And then I go back and then we still have partners or whatever. And I don't know, I've just known him for so long. He's just like a friend, and came out of a long-term relationship, moved back to Western Australia and was like, I'm going to be single. Lol. Was like single for, I don't know, maybe like 5 months or something. And then all of a sudden, Mitch and I happened, and it's just been so good because he is best friends with my family. So he really values my family. When we got married, my cousins were his best men. One was his best man, one was a groomsman. So they're standing down the end of the aisle. Like, it was very, very cool moment. And it's just so nice to feel so supported. Nice to just feel stable and like shit isn't hitting the fan constantly. It's just so nice. We got married pretty quickly, but I didn't have to wait 2 to 3 years to see the crazy come out. I've known Mitch for so long that I don't need to wait for the crazy. I know what he's about.
Yeah. This is a safe bet.
Yeah. Super safe bet. But he surfs. He has also spent his whole life at sea, half of his life. He's a ship's captain. So he spends half his life at sea, loves the ocean. He's super regimented, organized, stable, all the things that I'm not. So it's so good because I need a bit of that and he needs a bit of me. So it works really well.
That's so great. I'm so happy for you. Usually I would ask this question in a purely hypothetical sense, but it feels much more real in this context, considering the conversation we've just had. It's like if you have 10 years left of life before you change, before a bus hits you, before the unthinkable happens, what are you dreaming of for 10 more years on planet Ocean?
Well, ultimately, I would love to have kids. Now, how I do that is going to be difficult because there is this thing called PDG exclusion testing, and which means basically, in a very simple way of me explaining this, Mitch's sperm, my egg, embryo, and then they try and pull out this gene. They don't tell you if they had to pull out the gene, so then it keeps your mental health in check. If IVF fails, they don't tell you why it failed. They just say it fails, but say it could fail because they couldn't pull the gene out or they couldn't get an embryo without the gene or whatever it is, right? Now, so there's that bridge. We could go down that route. If IVF keeps failing, we could use an egg donor. If that doesn't work, we could adopt. But, this is going to be confronting times. It's going to be hard times. And I'm like, you know what? I've had enough of those for like the recent few years. I think I'm just looking at the next couple of years for me. Next couple of years are really dedicated to my career and to big wave surfing, and I want to go to Nazaré. I want to surf there. So that's like an immediate surf sort of thing I want to do. I want to go spend time there, to put a month or two in there, go back to Hawaii, really, really, really exhaust this big wave surfing thing before I try the mama route, because I don't want stones unturned, and I just fully want to be present for when I have a kid, if I do. And I don't want to be like, oh, I wish I did this or whatever. So there's that. And look, Mitch and I toyed about this idea, and I don't know if we would do it because I am now married to a captain. I'm like, well, why don't we buy a yacht and just bring our kids up on the yacht and sail around the world? I don't know. We talk about that a lot because I'm like, there's no better person to really do it with.
And hunt for big waves. Hunt for big waves. You could just like pass your newborn off to Mitch and he can paddle out and surf unexplored bommies in the Pacific.
Yeah. Bye, babe. Yeah. So look, there's that. I just see a lot of adventure. I see a lot of making the most of the really important relationships I have, and just being super conscious of how I spend my time. I think the one thing that this whole gene mutation has done is given me an incredible clarity of how I want to spend my life and who I choose to do that with, and what's really important. And the reality, though, of it is that we actually all are living in this. It's until something like this happens that it makes you realize that, hey, we don't actually have forever. It's just that I've got this constant thing going on being like, well, how you spend your time is important, and what you do is important, and where you put your energy is important. It's just the reality is it's just we're only seconds away from that happening. Everyone is. Everyone's living in this weird extra time. It's just that mine's a bit more real.
Thanks so much for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented Ben Alexander. The podcast soundtrack was composed by Shannon Soul Carroll, with additional tunes by Dave and Ben. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcasts, and you can subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast, and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcasts.com.